Well, hey everyone, Lauren Plant here with a special edition of State Champs Live presented by Lawrence Technological University. You know, Lawrence Tech is a private university founded in 1932 that offers more than 100 programs through the doctoral level in its colleges of architecture and design, arts and sciences, business and information technology, and engineering. PayScale lists Lawrence Tech among the nation's top 15% of universities for the salaries of its graduates. And U.S. News and World Report lists it in the top tier of best Midwestern university. Students benefit from small class sizes and a real-world, hands-on theory and practice education with an emphasis on leadership. Activities on Lawrence Tech's 107-acre campus include more than 60 student organizations and over 20 NAIA varsity sports. Take a virtual tour today at ltu.edu. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are joined today by the Michigan High School Athletic Association's Executive Director, Mark Uyl. Now, Mark, first off, we all really appreciate you coming on the program. Thank you so much.
You bet, Lauren. Good to be with you.
All right, it's good to see you. I'm glad that we're talking actually about sports. I'm also proud to say, just want to get this off the top, that State Champs Network and the MHSAA will be beginning our 4th year together as partners. We believe our mission of celebrating all high school sports and giving a platform where the focus is on the student athletes fits nicely with your mission statement. So right off the top, thanks for the opportunity for us to work together again.
You bet. Always good to have good teammates.
That's right. Absolutely. Okay. Before we begin, we are live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. If you have questions for the MHSAA Executive Director, Mark Uyl, you can ask them now, and Mark has agreed to try and answer them the best he can. We'll do that later in the program. So you announced on Friday that as of right now, the plan is to have high school sports, the traditional outdoor fall sports, begin at their regular scheduled August dates. Please tell the audience the process it took for the MHSAA to get to that decision.
Well, really, since about last March, we have been exploring a number of different options and possible contingencies about what our seasons could look like once it was safe to play. One of those models actually being considered took our normal spring sports, which of course all got canceled last school year, taking all of the spring sports and dropping them into the fall season, which did have some intriguing possibilities because all of those sports are outdoor sports, traditionally have fairly small crowds when compared to the normal fall and winter activities. So that got a lot of conversation. Governor Whitmer even mentioned that in one of her press conferences. So really what we needed to do is we've worked the whole summer with a number of different possibilities being out there, is the first decision we had to make was, okay, are we going to move or switch some seasons around, or are we going to try and move forward with our scheduled fall sports? And so the announcement last week that we're going to keep fall sports in the fall. We are going to attempt to start online with those sports that we can do so safely, really was the first step to both schools and parents so they can start to plan. Parents and families and kids know what sports are going to be on tap for this fall. And then our schools needed to know as well that if other sports were going to get shifted to the fall, maybe they'd have to hire new coaches. That maybe if baseball and softball got moved and my baseball or softball coach just retired, well, now I'm going to have to hire coaches. Obviously, there were lots of scheduling things that had to have taken place if seasons were going to be switched or flopped. So the decision last week and the announcement, with lots of conversation with our governing board, the representative council, is really going to let parents in schools and most importantly our kids know that the plan is that fall sports are going to stay in the fall, and we hope to get started the week of August 10th. But that is obviously subject to, just the twists and turns here over the next 3 weeks or so.
All right, well, great. Then if you can, for those, again, who may not have absorbed the news last weekend or just learning about it now, kind of summarize, encapsulate what the plan is right now and perhaps the contingencies that you have in place if we have a stoppage.
So you can really break it down into 4 parts. The first, which is certainly the thing that everybody is hoping and praying for is that all of our fall sports can start on time and finish without interruption. I think we would all agree that is best case scenario, so that's really option one. Option two, as we get to that week of August the 10th, maybe there's some sports that can safely start that week, and it might be our sports that are in the low risk categories. Certainly golf and tennis being the first two in that. Cross country, I know that has some challenges with the starting area, but I think that could be another sport that could potentially be a low risk start on time. And the other part to that is then maybe our moderate or higher risk sports, which would include soccer, which would include volleyball, which of course that's indoors, the same with girls swimming, and then obviously football. So kind of option two is that some sports could start on time while others get delayed. The third option would be that nothing can start the week of August the 10th, that we continue to have some negative numbers in terms of the cases and death rates and the R score, just some of those metrics that I know our state is using. And then plus the back to school plan changes, because a lot of us, this having school sports this fall is really predicated by schools having kids for in-person instruction. It's an awfully tough sell if schools are going to have all online or virtual education, that it's not safe during the school day, but it would be safe to have kids there for after school programs. So there could even be a scenario, Lauren, where all of our sports have a delay, that maybe nothing starts until school actually begins. And then from there, maybe all the sports move forward, or maybe, the lower risk sports are able to be played and the higher to moderate or the moderate to higher ones can. And then I think the fourth option, which is really the most negative one, is that not only can nothing start on time, but nothing can be played at all this fall. And what we would then look to do is we would then move on to winter sports next, shorten that season, and then what we'd look to do on the back half of the year in the spring leading into the summer is we then have 2 additional seasons. One of those could be all of our fall sports possibly being played in March, April, and May, and then the normal spring sports potentially going from May, June, and even finishing in late July. Some of those could get moved around a little bit. Obviously, those decisions for March and beyond don't have to be made now, but that's just the fourth and final contingency that we have in place. Do know that our biggest priority to serve our kids is we want to try and have 3 seasons. Perfect world, those would happen in order in fall, winter, and spring. But if that can't happen in the fall, if that's all sports, if that's some sports, if that's only a few sports, we would then look to get very creative into next spring and summer following the winter. I know that other states have already announced that they're not going to play football this fall. We are not at the point where we're making that decision yet. 2 of those states that have done so have been New Mexico and California. And certainly where they have some options that we don't is they can do things outdoors during the months of December, January, and February, where we're a little bit more limited based on our climate and our geography. But Lauren, those are really the 4 steps. Everything starting and everything continuing on time. Some sports starting on time, others being delayed. Possibly all sports get delayed, with then all or some of those getting played. And then last but not least, nothing can happen during this fall, and then we'd look to get creative after winter sports ends.
Okay, great. I give you guys a lot of credit because you obviously have laid out pretty much all the scenarios that we could be facing. And the important thing, of course, is implementation once you have to get to the next step of something that obviously happens. I know that you guys also have been doing some coordination with some of our border states. For instance, State Champs is inside Indiana. We are now going to be doing some expansion work into the state of Ohio. How much do you consult with them on making plans?
An awful lot. So I'm in almost daily conversations right now with our 4 bordering states. Wisconsin, because a lot of our schools by rule can play schools in Illinois. We consider Illinois a border state. And obviously our 2 neighbors to the south in both Indiana and Ohio. So we're talking every day to see what government officials are telling those states, because again, if we have to move some things or reschedule later in the year, we're all in a similar boat in terms of our climate and our geography and what some of those options are. I can also tell you, Lauren, that that's certainly one important data point. And then I'm also in daily contact with our colleges around the state. And I'm not talking just Michigan and Michigan State in terms of what the Big Ten's going to do, but what is the Great Lakes Conference, the Division II league that's got 2 schools in our Upper Peninsula, all the way down here to Grand Valley, Ferris, Saginaw Valley, Northwood, and then over to Detroit into Wayne State, as well as the MIAA, as well as our NAIA schools, because especially when making those decisions about our higher risk sports, which would include certainly football, boys soccer, and then an indoor sport, because right now indoor sports have some real challenges that outdoor sports don't. I want to see what our surrounding state associations are doing, as well as what our colleges are doing, especially with their soccer, football, and volleyball offerings this fall. So those are the daily conversations. We'll continue to take things on a week-by-week basis, but those are really, as much as, the news last week from Virginia, New Mexico, and now today from California, as much as those can be instructive, we're really trying to look at those that surround us.
Absolutely. And yeah, when they say we are pushing football in California, for instance, to 2021, that could be as early as January 2021, because you certainly have much better weather options in terms of starting a sport and playing outdoor sports in general. In fact, growing up in California, as I did, we played our soccer season in the winter. So there you go. As far as I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Michigan is currently in phase 4. This permits football, girls golf, boys tennis, cross country, and boys soccer to start as of right now at their regular dates in August. But as I understand it, until Michigan hits phase 5, girls swimming and diving and volleyball will not be able to begin. Is that correct?
Well, that's something that we're looking for more clarification on here over the next few weeks. There's even some discrepancies right now in our phases, that we've got some parts of in our state that when you look at the economic map, that we are in phases 4 or 5, but then you look at some of the other maps to where those show by the color code that we're actually in phase 3. So in the governor's roadmap to reopen schools, it does say quite clearly in there that athletic competition can take place when we are in phases 4, 5, and then obviously phase 6 is once the vaccine has gone away or we have a vaccine. In phase 4, even though it does say that athletic competition can take place, there are a number of requirements and extra things that everybody would have to do when we're in phase 4. And that's really no different than during the school day. If we're in phase 4, we can have in-person education, we can have sports, but there are a number of additional requirements to do so safely. When our state does move, or when a region moves into now phase 5, in-person education during the day, as well as athletics, yeah, there are a few requirements and special modifications that have to be made. But for the most part, phase 5 allows us to do an awful lot of things, and to do so, I won't say normally, but certainly more like the old normal than the new normal. So what we're really encouraging everybody to do here over the next few weeks is to do what all of the coaches, the Michigan and Michigan State coaches, urged last week, is to mask up, to do our part. If we want our kids to have a season, let's do our work now here over the next 3 weeks to try and drive those numbers down, where hopefully our entire state can move to phase 5 and we're able to move forward. But there will be more government guidance with the phases and with some of just the economic map versus some of the other maps that they've been using as it comes to defining phases. So on that front, Lauren, to answer your question, more news to come.
Okay, so we will put that on pause for right now. We really appreciate your time being able to speak to our audience. It's our our audience is growing by the minute here as we continue, because obviously everyone is super, super interested as we are getting now. I mean, it's going to be August before we know it. So next weekend, in fact. So obviously a lot of people with a lot of interest as to what's happening. Let me ask you this. Flipping the outdoor lower risk sports from the spring to the fall to replace the higher risk fall sports. This was a long talking point in discussion for how to safely reintroduce sports. But all along, it did seem that the MHSAA had been reluctant to really want to do that, even though you checked out the feasibility, of course, of that sort of a move. How much of that reluctance do you feel was from the standpoint of it being a logistical issue? And how much was from the fact that those spring sports had already lost one full season, and it would be a tough sell to put them in a position to lose two in a row?
You've just hit on two of the biggest reasons. Certainly to come up with new schedules in the fall, especially when most of our school personnel are currently working remotely. So yeah, certainly the logistics would have been one of those challenges. Taking our spring sports and moving them to the fall, and now again, if the numbers go in a bad direction in the first few weeks, now that full season of spring sports, they might be losing that in back-to-back years. Do know that if that would have happened, we would have tried to have done something at the back end of the year to address that. The other thing, we can all talk about, we think things may be better next spring and next summer, hopefully with a vaccine, but of course there's no guarantees. You do read some of the information that's out there, and there are some experts who believe that things will actually get worse this winter and beyond once we get into the flu season and just with that uncertainty. And Lauren, one other thing, while we were, you certainly can make the case, well, all of the low risk sports should have been moved to the fall. Well, now let's say that you've got a young person that plays both golf and tennis, or they play two other low or moderate risk sports. Well, I've grown up and I've planned for the last decade that these are going to be the two sports that I'm good at, that I'm going to invest my time in. Well, now because of the virus, we're now going to switch sports around on an individual or just in groups of two or three. Well, now, okay, that might help you with some of the virus issues, but now you've created new conflicts for kids. And so now you do have that senior who missed their spring season last year as a junior, and now the two sports that they play, we've now put him in the same season, and now we've just turned that two-sport athlete into a one-sport athlete by how we moved the seasons around individually. And that was something else that we just got a ton of negative feedback about. That if kids are a two-sport athlete and they've been planning for that, or even a three-sport athlete, and you're now going to put two of their sports in the same season, that was just a non-starter. So that's why a swap of seasons really had to be full and complete. And while volleyball and football and soccer is going to have challenges in the fall, they're not going to be that different than what a swap would have been. Now have those same challenges with girls soccer, and especially boys lacrosse. A full contact, close quarter, high impact, and high risk type sport. So those were the tenor, Lauren. That was a summary of how those conversations have really gone over the last 2 months. And a big part of that is we didn't want to try and address virus issues by moving seasons around individually. And now you've created even another set of issues with sport conflicts by putting two sports in the same season, which had never been there before.
Yes, I agree. We're starting to get some really good fan-contributed questions, and I promise we will get to those. So please hang in there. I do want to ask you a few more as we have this. Again, we appreciate your time, but this is important stuff. Have you had any discussions of further changes to this summer's schedule? So like perhaps opening up the dead week prior to the start of football practices, perhaps for some 7-on-7 competition?
Yeah, so those are ongoing. When I say that we're literally taking things on a day-by-day and a week-by-week basis, that is the honest-to-goodness truth. When I come into the office each day, the very first thing I do is I check to see if Governor Whitmer is scheduled to speak. If we are moved from phase 4 to phase 5 in the 6 regions where we're currently in phase 4, then that could mean there could be some summer competition that takes place between now in the week of August the 10th. The Representative Council, we are convening them again a week from this Wednesday on July the 29th, to where we think that will be a time where we can hopefully have an even more accurate picture of what August might look like. And that might even be a time where we take our preseason downtime, which runs from August 1st until the first day of fall practices, potentially even doing something different with the downtime, to where maybe you allow those 9 days, if again we're moved to phase 5, for summer competition, where you could get in then a week of 7-on-7s leading into practice starting the following week. Our soccer teams and volleyball teams potentially could get in some scrimmages with other schools close by to them. Potentially a basketball team camp might be able to go past that normal August 1st date. So we'll just continue to take that literally on almost a daily basis. The thing is, now with instant communication, the governor can speak, and if phases do get moved in one direction or another, we are able to put together some guidance very, very quickly, within hours in some cases, and get any updates or changes out to schools almost that very same day.
Okay, before we get to your questions, are there any sports this year that you believe, if we do even hit a phase 5, perhaps even a phase 6 scenario, although that seems highly unlikely, so let's say phase 5, that would be are going to be extremely difficult to pull off due to this pandemic, due to this crisis, kind of regardless of what phase we're in, that there are just any sports that are just going to be really, really hard to do?
I don't want to certainly, I guess I'll answer it this way. Yes, we have some fall sports where there are going to be some challenges. But my biggest concerns really center around a lot of our winter sports. Basketball and specifically wrestling. Those are two sports. Again, you're in the winter time. You're all indoors, awfully difficult to social distance fans and spectators and participants in those sports. Also, of course, during the winter, you're not only going to be dealing with COVID, but now you've got really the onset of flu season. And now with those factors all working together, there are some real challenges, I think, that we have come wintertime. Now, the saving grace is we do have some time here. And to be honest, that's really the one thing, Lauren, that we have now that we didn't have last March when everything came to a stop is, essentially our first time through the virus. You had from March until June to really come up with a plan yet for the 1920 school year. At least now, with us having, some of these issues in front of us, and even if we have to now get creative with seasons as we move forward, the thing is we do have 12 months here in front of us through the end of next July, where at least we can be creative and doing some things differently versus last March, where we've just had a short window, and then once in-person education ended for the year per the governor's executive order, that really put an end on that athletic year as well. So we'll continue to take things in small bits of time, again, here through the rest of the summer on a week-by-week basis. And I do think the one lesson we've all learned over the last 4 months during this pandemic is you just have to be ready, and you have to be flexible and nimble and willing to make adjustments sometimes on the fly, and that's what we're hoping to do.
Yeah, I agree. And I would say also that if there is a vacuum, if some of these sports are not able to go, we all know that there will be private institutions and privately run organizations that are coming in, going to try to fill that. And sometimes, of course, all have the best intentions. Some can be a little exploitive depending on what they're doing. But if there's a cost to that, and sometimes some people feel they have no other avenue.
Yeah, and that is true. I'm seeing that right now with some summer baseball and softball and other activities that are going on. And, for individuals that run those kinds of things as their livelihood, you tended to look at things different. It isn't about simply there's an interesting play at the plate right there.
Yeah.
It's more than just, the health and safety, but whenever you start to put money into the equation, where now you're making decisions based on livelihood and not just what's best for kids and what's going to keep kids the most safe. That's why I'm hoping, and that's why we're being as aggressively safety conscious as we can be. Because, Lauren, as you just said, you and I both know if we have no school sports this fall, there will be some entrepreneurs who are ready to move right into that space and offer kids opportunities to where money is going to get made. And sometimes when that happens, the priorities sometimes can get a little bit out of whack. So that's why we are going to try and, again, with safety being first, but we are going to try and be as creative and as innovative as we can, working hand in hand with in-person education as well as athletics.
Absolutely, yeah. And sometimes, not to the fault of any organizers, but sometimes, of course, you do not have the health and safety concerns that you might have. I know I certainly have seen it already in some outdoor travel, baseball especially. I've seen, fans in stands and not a lot of social distancing going on. And so let's hope that, being in the beautiful sunlight and all of that, it's vaporizing any of those issues. But let us get to some of these fan questions. Again, I've had you on longer than I said I would, so I appreciate you taking the time to do this. But we really do have some good ones. And okay, great. And this is one that I think so many share, and I'm sure it's repeated several times. Jim Thrushman asks, and he says, will the parents and fans be allowed in the stands?
So everything now with the governor's guidance is both, especially in phases 5 up north for summer events, whether that be an outdoor music concert or even something indoors, that there are numbers for spectators, and they're specifically for spectators, not counting the participants with the spectators. So numbers that we're currently hearing about are 100 for indoor events, 250 for outdoor events. So that is going to allow parents. And again, I'm currently, my middle son is going to be hopefully a 3-sport athlete this year going into his senior year. And I understand that just how important it is that moms and dads get to watch their kids play. So we're hopeful that if we are able to have activity this fall, yeah, there are going to be limits on spectators, but hopefully if, immediate family members, especially parents, are able to take part in that, that would be positive. The one thing I can also share is we are looking at being very creative regarding our streaming regulations, even some of our live television regulations, so that if spectator involvement is limited, that we will allow then for some other avenues to where those that want to watch will be able to watch.
Okay, good. What about concession stands?
Those, in just looking at the whole spectrum of challenges and issues and the things that are in your control and out of your control, ultimately what we've been told is that will be a local health department call. I do know that for many of our schools, that typically the booster clubs have run concessions, and that has meant a big source of funding for athletic programs. Well, if we're going to have limited spectators, certainly that benefit is greatly diminished. And if the issue becomes, if we're able to have events with limited spectators, but that means no concession stands versus, we have to have these open, then that decision, Lauren, would be to go without concession stands. Again, getting people in and out as quickly before the game, after the game, keeping as much social distance as we can. While in a perfect world, it'd be great to have that amenity for fans and spectators, I think everybody realizes that let's keep the main thing. And if we can allow competition to happen safely, and if that means without concession stands for a year, then so be it. But that'll, again, be a call made by local health departments.
Okay. Robert asks, if someone on my team or the team that we play against tested positive or is exposed to someone positive, would both teams have to quarantine and not get to play for 2 weeks?
So that's a really good question. And that's something that we're right now working with state health department leaders on to build those protocols for when you do have a positive case. If it does mean, I don't believe it's going to mean that entire teams. It's going to be those that have been identified within close contact. Regarding the specific number of days, that's going to be something that our health department leaders are going to define exactly what that period is. And too, Lauren, if we do have a delay or some sort of maybe a reduced schedule. I can tell you that one thing that is going to get consideration and at least conversation about here over the next few weeks when it comes to football is potentially expanding the tournament by a week and letting everybody in, because what you would hate to have happen is some gamesmanship now to be played with COVID regarding some schools getting in, other schools not getting in. So it could even mean a reduced regular season schedule. But when it comes to the playoffs, you would allow everybody in. So now, if a team would have to quarantine or not play for a week or two, when everybody's in the tournament, it does take off some of that pressure for how you're handling the regular season. And of course, in every other sport other than football, every school is in the tournament. So that'll be something else we just kind of look at and talk about as one of the possible options off that contingency when it does come to football. So that'll again be something that in early August, as we try and get started, that'll be something that does get a lot of conversation.
Will Conway asked a question I think other people would have, and again, would be interesting to hear a response. So if contingencies have to happen, let's say majority of the fall sports do have to finish at a later date, say in the spring, this is all just a one-year thing. So when we go to, let's say if the pandemic is contained, we have some vaccines, and by this time next year we're talking about a relatively normal space, then we would just go back to the way things were. We would not continue to have a fall sport being played in the spring, correct?
Exactly right. Yep. Again, what we're talking about, being creative and moving and having to do some different things, this is all pandemic related.
Okay. Howard wants to know, how will kids need to social distance and wear masks in class, but still be able to be up close and personal in football, for example?
So right now, the mask issue during the school day is one of which there is still more work to be done. School districts can opt out of a mask requirement during the day. That has to be something that their school board handles. This was a bit of an option because obviously we have schools in some parts of our state that have been really not impacted as much by the virus. Certainly when you get into northern Michigan or Upper Peninsula, the number dynamics have been much different than they have in certain parts here in the more downstate areas. So when it comes to masks during the school day, that isn't our issue. It's not one that I'm really going to give guidance on, but I do know that there are some, in terms of those mandates or what can happen during the school day, there is some local control that school districts do have in terms of how that will get handled. What we're going to do here by the end of this week is we will have, for all of our fall sports, some sport-specific guidance, which means some playing rule modifications, safety requirements, safety best practices that schools will need to utilize for fall competitions. So keep your eyes open for that, and that should be here coming out very shortly.
Okay, fantastic. Just a couple more here. Nathan says, since we take temperatures of athletes, are referees being required to check temperatures? I ask because I know there are some coaches that may push the limits with their starting and key athletes if they are on the bubble or even over in some cases.
So those return to play protocols are something that we're in the process of finalizing. To have officials do that, I don't think is the right approach. There are some HIPAA and FERPA laws that are in play here when it comes to taking temperatures. And for officials, that really extends beyond their authority. Plus, you know that you've got some officials to where for game participants, they're going to be subject to those same screening protocols as well. We are going to, I'm sure, lose some coaches and officials possibly for the year based on their age, based on an underlying health condition that they may have, to where they just choose in this, really year of transition and uncertainty that they may take a season off or a year off because of that. So we certainly understand, the competitive angle to that question, but my goodness, when it comes to the long-term health and safety of your kids and the kids that you're playing against, as well as everybody right now, I think if anybody is going to be making those kinds of decisions or determinations based on anything what's good for everybody's health and safety, that is obviously quite concerning.
Yes, absolutely. And Chester wants to know, and just maybe you could just lay it out simply, what needs to happen to allow basketball players, and I think that's what he's asking, when are they going to allow teams or players back in the gym?
Well, when it comes to the gyms, of course, that's when the state moves to phase 5. The issue on those indoor facilities in 6 of our regions, that was actually challenged in federal court, and the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals out of Cincinnati sided with Governor Whitmer that she can keep those indoor facilities closed in phase 4. Now, some decisions are going to have to get made here by our state leaders in the next couple weeks, because in phase 4, it does say that in-person education can take place in the governor's roadmap. In phase 4, it can say that athletic competition can take place. So at some point, there's going to have to be further guidance on what is going to be allowed here in phase 4 in August and beyond, not just for those gyms and weight rooms and workout facilities, but obviously for all of our schools with that. So we talked earlier about, there are still a few issues to where there's been some contradictions in policy and guidance, and that has to be one of those things here in the next 3 weeks that will need to be cleared up by our elected leaders.
Okay. Yeah, he followed up with all sports. And Chester, I think he means all sports, anything as far as indoors, that is the way it would take place. And just so we're clear, too, if we do have to push things back, you have said, and I just want to make sure that everyone knows, if it requires the spring season to go as late as July in order to finish, everybody says, I'm okay with that.
There haven't been many positives the last 4 months, Lauren, but the one positive with our school people and even the parents and students that I've heard from through email and phone calls we've taken is there is a spirit of cooperation, and we will do whatever it takes that we have right now that I'm not sure that we've had in decades. So absolutely, if we need to get very creative to make our 3 seasons work, and if that means that we're going to be playing into late July next year, almost everybody has said, well, if it means that and not having a season, we'll see you in late July next year. So I just think everybody is so ready to get back to some activity here once it is safe to do so, not just for everybody's physical well-being, but you just worry about everybody's mental health. I mean, the last 4 months that we've all lived through have been unlike anything during any of our lifetimes. And, just the heartbreak that our seniors this past year, those kids in the class of 2020 had to go through, we just hope that we can give here some experiences to the class of 2021 and beyond, which are certainly more typical than what kids have enjoyed for a long, long time.
Okay, this is the final question, I promise, Mark, and it is with reference to face shields. We've seen now that I think it was Rydell was going to provide some free full face shields that could be attached to helmets. Do you think that is something that will be a requirement, or is this something we still are not sure?
So that's going to be something. So, I've gotten some emails that, right around July 1st, there were some folks that were disappointed that we didn't have the detailed plan out of exactly what the fall is going to look like. Well, this is going to be one of those issues over the next few weeks that we're going to continue to look at. They are allowed by rule, so that the playing rule have already been modified. But in order to make it a requirement, Lauren, you have to make sure that there's going to be enough availability of these. And certainly a lot of the research and data tells us that this is a big risk minimization factor. This would be a great thing to have, but they've got to be available if you're going to make it a requirement. So there have to be quantities enough of these for all of our schools to have them, as well as the cost factor would need to make sense as well, because we do have some kids in some communities to where that cost would be a big factor. So as much as we'd love to have everything here spelled out as of January 20th, that may be something that we're not able to fully ring in with schools on until we get into either very late July or maybe even that first week of August leading up to August 10 and beyond.
Okay. Well, Mark Uyl, thank you, sir, for taking as much time as you did to answer our audience's questions as well as my questions. Some of our team contributed some of these questions as well. We're all in this together. You've said that a couple of times during the course of this conversation, and you're right. We're all going to get through this. This too shall pass, and we will just pay attention to the news as it breaks. And I would say also, and totally reiterate what you said, wear the mask, people. You want to play, wear the mask. Let's follow what we need to do so that we can get everything back to as normal as quickly as we can. And once again, thank you for your time. And if anything develops or breaks or whatever, we would certainly love to have you back on here in this forum so you could talk to the people. We appreciate it.
Sounds great, Lauren. And again, mask up. Save our kids' seasons.
That's right.
We need your help.
Okay, you got it. You got it. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mark. We appreciate it very much. And thank you so much for tuning into this special edition of State Champs Live presented by Lawrence Tech. We really appreciate Mark giving us as much time as he did. And hopefully we answer the majority of your questions. I know we all still have questions, but we're going to figure this thing out as we get closer to game day. And there will be game day. So again, mask up. Do what we need to do, and we're going to get back out there and see these kids doing what we love to see them do. And, of course, that you're going to be able to catch it all right here on the State Champs Network. As I alluded to at the beginning of the program, we are actually now moving into Ohio as well. So we have Indiana high school content, Michigan high school content, and Ohio high school content, all sports that we'll be covering. We're just growing and trying to make this thing as big as we can and try to serve as that hub as so much high school sports coverage has diminished over the years. We wanted to increase, and we want to be able to provide that to you. So download the free State Champs app. You can do that now. In fact, very shortly, we're going to have it available so that if you're at games and you are able to catch an amazing clip or something of that nature, we would like you to film it. We would like you to upload it, and then we will be able to share it with the State Champs community, even put some of those clips into our shows. And we've got some great shows getting ready to start as early as August. I'll probably do another one of these, just kind of tell you everything we have planned. But we'll just give this a little more time just to make sure things are going to start when they say they're going to start. So other than that, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Lauren Plant, and we'll see you next time on State Champs Live.